Chris Hamper. He is a nationally registered paramedic and works in the Clark County. Kind of on the side.
Yeah, on the side.
On the side.
Yeah.
And then he's also a faculty member at OHSU in the Department of Emergency Medical Services. And he should be the presentation tonight. So please welcome.
So let's see if I can get this to come up now. See? There we go. Hey, there we go. All right. So again, my name's Chris. I really like interaction. This presentation thrives on interaction, and if you don't interact, we're going to be out here in about 10 minutes, and it'll be not worth you showing up. Also, if you don't interact, I get real nervous, and if I get real nervous up here, then I start to sweat, and if I start to sweat, then I get smelly, and that's uncomfortable for everybody. So we're gonna talk a little bit about integrating the teams between EMS, so the emergency services, and ambulance, along with athletic trainers. So from what I understand, a lot of you are pretty close to the finish. How many are seniors? So basically the front row. Okay. How many juniors? All right, kind of scattered in the middle, and then the first years, sophomores, I guess would be what it is. All right, and then any freshmen? Yeah. All right. You guys are pulling it in, getting your 1 credit to apply. Is that correct? Yeah. Basically. Okay. All right. Like Tori said, I work at OHSU's paramedic program. We have a paramedic student here as well who decided to take time out of his midterm week to come and listen to the lecture. One of my huge passions is improving the relationship between EMS personnel and different faculty or different allied health professionals. So what I did earlier this year is I worked with nursing students to do joint simulations and joint training between nursing students and paramedic students. So I'm really excited to be here to talk to you guys today and talk to the athletic training group about how we can improve this relationship. So here's some goals for our talk today. So one goal that I really want you to leave with, if you have nothing else, is what is an EMT? So what are the levels of an EMT? What can they do? Why do they exist? So just a basic overview of that, because it's fairly new, fairly fresh. If you have questions throughout the process here, throughout the evening, raise your hand, ask, let's throw it out there. Introduction, a crucial step. So introducing yourself to the EMS team. We'll talk about kind of how to do that, when is it appropriate, what do we say, what do you need to know, what they need to know. We'll talk about a handoff report, how to give one, conflict, because I understand there's sometimes some rubs between professions. And then also we're going to do a forward-thinking exercise to kind of wrap it up. Any questions before we get started? No? All right, cool. So first thing first, what is an EMT? So there are 3 levels of EMT in Oregon. This is in a transition process because at the national registry level, they decided it wasn't complicated enough, so we're going to make it less complicated. And they're going to do it, instead of being an EMT paramedic, they're going to change it to just paramedic, and instead of being an intermediate, they're going to change it to a couple different styles of intermediate. So we'll start at the bottom, and the bottom is an emergency medical technician. Now who has taken, it should be most of you, who has taken that emergency class freshman year? So everybody but the freshmen have taken it. That class is a good prelude into an emergency medical technician course. So these guys are usually 3 to 6 months worth of training. It's usually pretty intensive training, several nights a week, plus an all day on Saturday, learning how to do the things that you do already in the field as an athletic trainer, as well as learning some more in-depth medical pathophysiology, how to treat basic heart attacks, how to treat anaphylaxis, those types of things. So as we start at the beginning, we work our way up. So this is our foundation. Everybody has to have this level before we move on and up the ladder. Then we get, in Oregon, we have what's called an EMT intermediate. So any guesses what an intermediate can do on top of that? Just throw something out there. They can do IVs, they can do injections, absolutely. That's what basically separates the emergency medical technician from the emergency medical technician intermediate. They can give a couple of drugs through those, usually advanced cardiac drugs, and they can give a couple of things like 50, some sugar water for hypoglycemic patients. Past that, not a whole lot extra that they can do. They can put in a couple different airways as well. That's usually the intermediate, pardon me, is usually about a 3 to 6 month process as well, on top of the technician. Then we get to the top of the food chain, the paramedic. So this is what Alex is in the process of doing right now with our program. It's what I am, all of our faculty members are. And in Oregon, most cases, one of the people on your ambulance is going to be a paramedic. The paramedic is, like I said, the top of the food chain, and what they can do is, last I counted, was over 40 meds in my med box. We can start IVs, we can intubate, we can push cardiac medications, defibrillate using manual defibrillation, and something that only nurse anesthetists and doctors can do is intubate. I believe I already said that. This is another year, minimum of a year process to getting this level of licensure. And it's a very intensive year. If you have questions about it, Alex, I'm sure can start to enlighten you. He's about a month and a half, and sorry, I'm going to pick on you through this. He's a good sport. I actually taught his emergency medical technician course and now have him as a paramedic student. But it's 12 months that you give your life to a program. You basically don't work, you don't do home life very well, you don't do much very well except for sit and look at a book and work on an ambulance and work in the hospital. So this is broken into, for our program, it's broken into a few different phases. A didactic phase where you're in classroom, you're sitting, you've got tests every couple of weeks. The second phase is clinicals, which Alex is about to enter, where they're in the hospitals doing rotations in the emergency room, the operating room, the psychiatric rotations on the floor, in the ICU, those types of things. And then the final phase of that training is out on the field in an ambulance. They have to do a minimum of 480 hours on an ambulance running calls with a paramedic preceptor. So on top of the emergency medical technician, the paramedic has that extra year. Now we can skip this step. This step isn't a necessity for the paramedic level. You can go straight from EMT to straight to paramedic. The intermediates are generally rural areas, and they like to have it because they can't afford a paramedic, or they can't, they're volunteers, and the volunteer can't dedicate that much time to go to paramedic school because they have a full-time job and a family. So why did I really say this? And there's some ways that we can make our interactions successful between a paramedic and an athletic trainer. So anybody have any ideas of what ways we can make our interactions successful? I'm starting to get
Know
sweaty.
each other's knowledge base.
Know each other's knowledge base, absolutely, absolutely. Great. Anybody have any other ideas? Yeah.
Efficiently communicating symptoms, what happened, mechanism, so the paramedic knows where to pick up on.
Great, great. Yeah.
Haven't seen it.
You were gonna say that? Or were you just gonna slide right in there? You saw his hand go up and slide in. I'm giving you a hard time. So we'll start with the introduction. The introduction is a crucial step. Like Tori said, knowing each other's scope of practice, which is a term I don't know if it's familiar with you. Is that familiar to you? Knowing each other's scope of practice will allow you to figure out what can I do, who's going to do what, why aren't they doing what I think they should be doing. So anybody have any ideas of when it would be appropriate to introduce yourself to the EMS crew? Yeah.
Like before the game, especially like when they're at football sites or something, introducing yourselves before like a crisis situation happens.
Great. And so when you introduce yourself, it's pretty simple. You walk right up to the ambulance and say, "Hi, my name's Tori. I'm athletic trainer, and this is what I can do when something happens. This is how I'm going to wave you over. This is how I want you to come in." Also, something that's good for you to understand is what level are they? So it could be 2 EMT basics on that ambulance, and you may be the one totally in charge. They may not step in to take charge when they are called out there. Now, if it's a paramedic, those guys are we're pretty aggressive. I will say that, and I apologize for anyone that's had a negative interaction with one. But we're used to being the top dog in the food chain. This is our environment. Anywhere outside of a hospital, that's our office. And so we may be a little bit more aggressive. So one way to kind of curb that is to say, hey, when you come out, what I want you to bring standard is bring your cot backboard, and bring a trauma kit. Everything else I should have. I have OPAs, I have NPAs, I have this stuff in my bag. I have backboards. You don't need to bring that. That'll help them understand what you have and what your level is and what they can use from you. Then you can also say, when you get out there, I'm going to be doing kind of my assessment, and I'll direct you as which way we're going and how we're going to do that. Any questions on that? Good. Let me make sure because this is the first time I've given this presentation. Let me make sure I've hit all my points that I wanted to here. I did. Excellent. So we're going to pre-plan our event. Now there's this excellent article I read in Athletic Training Journal. The journal, I believe, is the Journal of Athletic Training from March of 2002 by this guy J.C. Anderson and his colleagues. Now in this article, it's about 1 or 2 pages, and I can get you a copy of it if you haven't read it. In his article, he illustrates the need to pre-plan our event. And what he means by pre-planning the event, it's kind of threefold. And there's 3 pieces to that. First one is writing down the plan. So when something happens, if we're on our softball field or we're out at the baseball field, which may be 2 separate places, how do we get the ambulance in? How do we give them directions to where I'm going? What do they need to bring? What hospitals are closer? What treatment protocols are we working on? If this isn't written down and it's all in your head, nobody else can know about it, which is step 2. Step 2 is educating not only your faculty members, so all the other athletic trainers on your team. So here for you seniors, here in another year, you may be out of high school working as an athletic trainer, and you may be the one in charge. You go out to a rural place, you may be it. So educating your team on that plan, including your coaches. And also extending that to the EMS department. Fire departments love to get phone calls and say, hey, so I'm so-and-so, I'm from the high school across the street's athletic training division or with their football team, and I got some just pre-planned stuff that we need to go over, and they love to hear that. Fire guys, emergency responders, we're so used to being hit blindsided by things that anytime we can pre-plan something so that we know what we're going to do when, we absolutely jump on that opportunity. So get it written down, get your team trained, and get the fire department and the EMS service on board with your plan. And then the last step of that pre-plan, or the thing that J.C. Anderson illustrated, was to practice it. Has anybody run any drills with firefighters or emergency responders? Yeah? How did it go? What did you do?
It wasn't here, but it wasn't very good.
It wasn't very good. Tell me about it.
I'm also a lifeguard, and the fire department came and they're like, oh, we're going to take a practice responding to an aquatic emergency, cardiac event, use like an 8-year-old boy or something like that. Because I think it's because we've never done it at that pool, but the fire department's right up the street. I'm like, oh, this is close, let's just try this here. The parking lot's tiny, there's some lessons going on, a whole bunch of like people around watching, oh, what's going on?
So the training itself wasn't very well planned around
Yeah.
the other athletic.
But otherwise, like, communication between us went well.
Good. This is the time to practice it before things happen, before that big emergency. And when you're in charge and when you're part of that athletic team, it may be up to you to say, hey, let's practice this. Let's practice the handoff. Let's practice our planned event here, because it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when it's going to happen rather than if. So when we have our varsity football game, when the player goes down, let's have that scenario run a couple of times with a couple of different crews, so we can find what are the kinks. Did we find out that there's a key to the gate down the road that we don't have, or the lock that we don't have a key to? So these are some things that you'll find when you're not under the super amounts of stress, when somebody's actually hurt. And then understanding the roles of each member, which is exactly why we went through the introduction stage and then also the levels of EMT. Are there any questions so far? No? Pretty straightforward stuff? Okay. The handoff report. So you had mentioned giving a handoff report and what that includes. So the key to giving a handoff report is making sure you understand what the other person needs to hear and wants to hear. So does anybody have an idea of what a paramedic needs to hear? Yeah, go ahead.
Patient history, allergies.
Allergies, great. Yeah, absolutely. Vital signs, yep, yeah.
I was gonna say just like what happened.
Yeah, what happened? Absolutely.
General information, what's their name, like insurance, if you have it.
Great, great. Yeah, the information that you have is absolutely excellent. Now it comes in a certain format that's really nice to hear. And you can practice giving a handoff report with each other and being really confused if it doesn't come in a format that's appropriate. So if it came with like insurance first and then what happened at the end, it gets really confusing. Like, okay, well, what happened? What do you want me to do here? Why am I here? So the first thing that is nice to start with is kind of a name, age, gender, those kinds of things, if it's not totally obvious. For the second thing, a chief complaint. Now, I'm sure you've learned about a chief complaint, and it's basically what is wrong. They rolled their ankle, and the bone is sticking out the side. They have leg pain. Right? What happened? And we're talking a brief history. And what I say is a brief history is there's oftentimes, in the heat of the battle, get into listening to a report, and you hear, oh, this is Billy, and he's 6, and his mom's here, and he was running, this is fourth grade football, and he was running this direction, he was going for a touchdown, and he was going this way, and jumped over that guy, and it's 3 or 4 paragraphs long before we actually get to what happened. So the brief history, it really means a brief history. He was hit from the side like this. He went head on with another player. The hockey stick cut him in the neck. Those types of things. Past that, unless it's super relevant, like he flipped over 6 or 7 times before landing on his head, not really relevant. We can add to the end of the report. And then last, no, I don't think this is last. I think it's more fun. But as I'm sorry, what's your name?
Mason.
As Mason pointed out, allergies, meds, and medical history. So why did I list allergies first? So I don't give them the wrong drug, absolutely. Also, this is the only piece of history that I can't figure out, or that the doctor can't figure out in the hospital. So if a patient comes in with a car wreck and is totally mangled and we know nothing else, we need to know allergies. We can figure out medical history, we can figure out what meds they're on, we can figure out all the other details of the accident. But if we don't know allergies, it's very difficult to go back, and it's very difficult to be like, okay, well there's that drug, oops, they're allergic to that one. So allergies comes first. So if you get nothing else from this section, allergies is the key. And then anything you've done. So what are some things that you might do on a football field for let's say a head-on hit? Yeah, go ahead.
I thought you were just gonna leave it
Or open end.
I
Go
was
ahead.
gonna say
Yeah.
vacuum splint.
Vacuum splint. Excellent. What else? Spine board. Great. Great.
Check for dislocations.
Good. Yeah, that should be in there. Absolutely. Anything from like the back middle section? Don't know much yet? Real shy, kind of quiet? Okay, that's fine. We'll leave it at that. But anything that you've done up to this point. So if you've given an EpiPen, if you've given a shock with a defibrillator, that all needs to be in here. Any questions before we move on from the handoff report? Okay. So moving on from here, we have not all conflict is bad. And what do I mean by this? Why is not all conflict bad? Yeah, go ahead.
Like maybe someone accidentally forgets a step and you just bring it up. It's not necessarily like, oh, he's trying to call me out. It's, oh, thanks, like,
Absolutely.
should have done that.
So conflict can go 2 different directions. And when we study conflict on a macro scale, the multinational or national scale, you can see conflict going in two directions. You can see it going destructive conflict, or you can see it going constructive conflict. So destructive conflict on the national scale is more of the deaths and genocide, that kind of thing. When it goes constructive, it may have pieces of that, but overall it's improving the situation. So it may have some of that really mean and nasty things that really don't make you feel very good, but it's improving your situation, improving your plan for the next event, or improving in the macro scale, improving the life of the citizens. So when we talk about conflict and how to make conflict go from destructive conflict to constructive conflict, what are the ways that we think we might be able to do that? Anybody have any ideas? Yeah, go ahead.
Instead of like, if you feel that something's going in the wrong direction or a step was missed, instead of just like rudely trying to integrate that step into the situation without saying anything or telling anyone, you like very politely mention it and try to. I mean, you have to be very like, brief and succinct in those situations, but still try to leave light.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ways we can do that is by being polite and then also making it as a team-centered approach rather than a individual-centered approach. So hey guys, we missed this step. We C-spined the head before we did the body, and we can't do that. So let's back this up a step. And everybody's like, oh, whoops, that was all of our mistake. Because when we're studying teams and teams in emergencies, we notice that teams don't succeed as individuals and don't fail as individuals. It's not the team leader's fault for the bad patient outcome. It's the fault of the team. So if something's not going correctly, it's your responsibility. Every single person's responsibility on that team to bring it up and say, hey, we're missing something here. His leg's sticking sideways. Why are we up at the head? So when you go from destructive conflict to constructive conflict, we really need to focus on a team-centered approach, saying we instead of you or I, and also saying that we're focusing more on the patient, so a patient-centered approach to your care. So after your event has happened and after the call is run and the patient takes off in the ambulance and you go back to playing football or to playing hockey or whatever sports you're at, how do we go from there? What's our next step? I'm telling you, our next step is to call up the fire department, call up the ambulance service and say, hey, I just wanted to meet with your crew or meet with the supervisor and just go over what happened here and ways that we can improve upon it. Now this could be very delicate, so make sure you take a breath before you make that phone call and say, how can we improve upon this? Take that patient-centered approach and say, hey, so we need to improve this because the person didn't even get backboarded and they had neck pain. I wasn't listened to as an athletic trainer. I told you he had neck pain and the paramedics pushed me aside and said, don't care. So taking that time to say, hey, this is going to happen again and I want to improve it for the next time that it happens. I want to improve it for my patient for the next time it happens to my patient. Calling up the fire department and say, hey, let's have a little meeting and just sit down and debrief about this. I want to find ways that I can improve on how to hand off a patient. So if I don't know how to hand him off, and if I said something that shut down that paramedic, I'd like to know about it. And if clearly they shut you down and didn't want to listen to you, that would be something as a re-education for them as well. So the helmet dilemma. What do we think about this? Do we leave the helmet on? Do we take it off? Has anybody experienced the helmet dilemma, so to speak? Anybody had that issue in the sports? Any of the faculty members?
Why are y'all looking at me?
Because you told
Ever
us
had an
stories.
experience when the paramedics wanted to take the helmet off and you wanted to leave it? Can you share that experience, Craig?
We had a wide receiver who was undercut and landed vertically on his head, and the paramedics on scene wanted to remove his helmet, and we had two orthopedists there, and both of them said no. And the paramedic said, well, you can tell us no, but as soon as we get in the ambulance, we're taking it off. So one of the orthos got in the ambulance and rode with them to the hospital.
That's a way of dealing with that, absolutely. And I don't discredit the orthopedist at all. I'm on that orthopedist side. If you don't think that there's something going right with that, and you feel like your patient or your player is in danger, make sure you stand up for them. You're the advocate. They may not be able to advocate for themselves. So with that, what are some ways that we can convince the paramedics, instead of just saying, no, don't take that helmet off, what are the ways that you can convince them to do that? Alex, you've had quite a bit of training now in crew resource management. How can we
I need a logical reason. If you just tell me no, I'm gonna get more. It's like you said, Chris. We're all pretty aggressive in EMS and fire. You just tell me no, and I don't know who you are. Okay, you're an athletic trainer. Okay, why? Why not? I need to know why. I need to know